Hi, everyone. I'm James Garbutt.
And I'm Denny Dumas.
And this is the Garbutt Dumas Real Estate Podcast.
I've been wanting to do this for a while. every 2 weeks when we meet, Jamie and I, literally the night before usually, send texts back and forth saying, hey, what do you want to talk about tomorrow? And every time I usually try to have 3 suggestions. And one of them is, let's talk about our first year. Let's just it'll be fun. We'll share some stories. We'll share some mistakes that we made. We'll share some interesting things that people probably wouldn't know about, like our first ever headshot shoot. It was me and, my ever first headshot shoot. So Jamie is 6 years ahead of me in real estate, I think. I was 2014, you were 2008?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so 6 years ahead. So when I started, one of the first things, Jamie's like, whoa, we need a headshot. So we go to Pier Park. I show up wearing this hilarious suit from my grade 12 grad, I think.
I think we both had bad suits on.
It was so bad. It didn't fit properly.
Mine might have edged yours out, but it was nothing to brag about, that's for sure.
Oh man, it was very out of style. It didn't fit. It was 4 sizes too big. Anyway, we go to the new Key. I have no idea what I'm doing. Jamie shows up with a camera and a white construction paper board. I'm like, What the hell is that for? He's like, the shadows on your face, man. Like he's
I wanted
a
to bring out the
photographer.
light under his eyes.
So the photo shoot is me standing in Pier Park, Pier Park, I think, with this white construction paper board underneath my face to reflect the sun into my face so that there wasn't shadows under my eyes. So my very first business card, you guys can't see unless you're watching on YouTube, but I'm so squinty because the sun is reflecting off this board.
I'm sure it was an amazing photo, Denny. I think what Denny failed to mention, even though, yes, he has been trying to push for this episode for the last little while, what he forgot to mention is what my feedback to him is I think we got to kind of cater the episode. We could share our stories of our first year and our early days, but the message has got to be, it's your first year in real estate. What do realtors do? And I think the whole point of what we want to accomplish here is just kind of give some inspiration, ideas, tips for new realtors by also sharing some of our hilarious stories from our early days. Yeah. And Denny's first year was my 6th year. If you're really trying to visualize that first headshot, imagine 2 guys in loose suits at Pier Park in New Westminster with a camera on a tripod and a big art, thick stock cardboard sheet of white.
It's like what you do projects on in high school.
Yeah, it's my science project background. But that would illuminate your face, and it ended up with a phenomenal headshot, Denny.
So our compromise for this podcast was we get to share some stories, but we'll also relate them into first year and trying to be helpful towards new realtors in the business and things we learned and things that worked well, things that didn't work well, maybe some tips. But before we get into the tips and the learning and all the good stuff, you have to talk about your hair in that first photo.
Oh, well, okay. First of all, let's just acknowledge that was year 6 of my real estate career, and every headshot leading up to that point, I did myself. So it was, one was on the couch, my living room with a green background, if you remember that green look. Yeah. But yeah, the hair that I had, it was probably the long, this is not the right format to describe hair, but it was fabulous, I would say, would be one word.
Can't argue with that.
It was large and voluminous, but it went down to my shoulders and it flared out in all directions and it looked ridiculous. It was, it was wild. And sometimes one day I'll bring it back. It'll be a little more gray.
Okay, let's get into the good stuff. I want to start by sharing my 3 levels of realtor. So I believe there are 3 levels of realtor in Greater Vancouver. I haven't worked outside of Greater Vancouver, so I can speak for our province, our areas. There is beginner status. You're just starting. You're trying to learn as much as possible. You should be asking a lot of questions. There's going to be things that you don't know about stratas, about contracts, about due diligence, all that kind of stuff. You're learning. It's a process. Everyone starts from there. Round 2, which is where a lot of realtors in Greater Vancouver are, is competency. And for lack of a better word, I'm using competent. It means you understand how to write contracts, You understand maybe the basics of construction. You are more familiar with stratas and what due diligence needs to go into buying and selling condos. And that's where a lot of realtors stop, I feel. And then there is a third category, and I call it rockstar. You can call it advanced. You can call it sensei. You can call it superstar, whatever word you want to call it. I feel like there's a very small percentage of Greater Vancouver realtors that get to this category. And that is just next level service, next level marketing, complete understanding of contracts, a much higher standard or a much higher knowledge of construction, never really coming to a problem and not knowing how to solve it. And there's definitely things that happen on a daily basis for us that we don't know the answer to, but we know where to get answers very quickly. And when you're starting,
I think degrees of black belt is the right way to approach that one.
Yeah.
We're talking about advanced, but it's like there's levels of that black belt.
Yeah. Each of the three categories can be broken down into subcategories. I'm totally open to that. I'm just saying, here's the three generic categories that you kind of go through in your career. And so one of the things I tell any new agent that reaches out or new realtors that come onto our team that are just starting in the industry is you want to get to competent, you want to get to that level as soon as possible. So how do we do that? And how did you do that in your first year?
Jeez, remembering what, 13 years ago now. Oh, as long as I've done something.
I was thinking about that literally last week. Like before this, I worked for my dad bartending in pubs for 5 years. Knew that wasn't for me. Then I worked at a bank for 5 months. Like there's jobs in between, but I've never really stayed somewhere this long.
Yeah. I guess when I look back, I think contract really sticks out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, contract competency is, it's a challenging thing for new realtors, and I think that's arguably the most important thing because it's the contract of the purchase and sale.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, I mean, for the most part, for me, I had the advantage of becoming a realtor when I owned, I think I had 2 or 3 condos at that time. So I had some history of owning a place, but that didn't mean I was an expert by any means, nor did I know the important stuff of contract. But all I would say is don't wait for someone that wants to write a contract to figure out how a contract is written. Make sure you proactively have example contracts for different situations available to you. And if you don't, find them right now. Like, I mean, there's no excuse to wait till the final. Like, if you're a realtor and you don't know how to do a subject to sale contract or a subject free contract, or you name the circumstance, there's a tenant in the place. How do you do that? If you don't have that already handy, don't wait to run into that circumstance. Find it now. Managing brokers, some are phenomenal. Some may not be available when needed. I mean, I had the advantage of having a phenomenal managing broker in my early career, Jason Watson over at Sutton there, and he was great. You know, he answered everything that I had when I ran into weird situations well. He would rarely give me the go seek a lawyer's advice answer, and he'd give me a practical answer. But, sometimes you need to seek a lawyer's advice. But overall, I had confidence in my contract ability. And when I wasn't confident, I had a managing broker that would help me then. And I think just having access to some templates and contracts is important.
I think a lot of people have this ego in our industry. It is... it's pretty common in real estate, but they have this ego coming in that they think I can do it myself versus I think at the beginning, it's very important to be proactive in your learning, ask a ton of questions and seek out someone who's going to be available for you in the heat of the moment, whether it's in multiple offers or whether there's a weird situation with a strata that you need an answer on, to be able to guide you a little bit. And for you, it was having Jason Watson. For me, it was having you. Like 6 or 7 years into your...
Thank you, Denny.
But I think it's so important because there's so many situations that come up daily that in your first year, there's just zero history, zero experience for you to know what or how to handle that situation. And I think, like you say, proactive. I think that if you don't take anything else away from this podcast, take away proactive learning is ultra important. If you don't know something, go home and Google it. You hear the term rain screen for the first time at your first condo showing. What does that mean? Google rain screen. When did rain screen become or get part of building code? How to look for rain screen? Whatever. What does a rain screen cost? Like all those different.
A real simple thing is willingness to figure out how to learn. Like if you, it's not expected that you're going to know everything, but every time you don't know something, you don't have the first instinct be call someone that does.
Yeah.
Go to Google to start. Look at there depends on the example, but there's a lot of resources out there. Like we still run into cases, like whether it's a property or a circumstance that's new to us. I mean, we've been through a lot of different experiences, but every once in a while something new comes up. And we have no advantage we have no knowledge on this property or what it is. Maybe it's, it might be in a different real estate board, or it might be just a unique piece of land of some sort.
Maybe it's an old care facility in Surrey.
Maybe that too. But we know the steps of who do we reach out to and where do we start looking, as opposed to just stare blank at a wall and try to find someone to help us.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to call city halls, dig into planning or building, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But just willingness to make calls and try to learn first. And I find that things will stick better when you investigate yourself. And I think as just any agent, but particularly new agents, there's dead times in the day and the week. There's times in the day and the week that are great for promoting yourself and marketing and being in front of clients. There's also times of the day and the week that aren't good for that. And those are the times where you need to learn. Mm-hmm. We're talking about contracts here, but
there's a few different areas. I think
types.
Contracts is extremely important. I think construction is important to have basic knowledge. Strata, it's important to have basic knowledge, and that kind of grows over time. But one of the things I always say to people is figure out what areas of the city you plan to live and work in long term, whether that is Vancouver, whether that is Tri-Cities, whether that is Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, whatever it is, Fraser Valley. Google top realtors in Fraser Valley, top realtors in Pitt Meadows, wherever it is that you want to work. Reach out to all of them. Someone's going to say yes. Just say, hey, can I follow you around for a week? And I got so much value out of sitting in the back of Jamie's car, listening to him talk to buyers on buyer tours, and we're driving through the city of New West, city of Burnaby, wherever it was, and he's pointing out buildings and saying, hey, that one potentially has a parkade coming up. That's a rental building. This is a 2003 building. In here, you're going to get 2 bedrooms that are 900 square feet for, at the time, $350,000. Doesn't exist anymore. No. And so what I kind of took away from that is, man, this is a ridiculous amount of value that on my buyer showings, these agents don't know. So this is something that I feel is very important. I feel like in your first year, it's very overwhelming and you don't know where to start. But if you have the opportunity to follow someone around who is very good and has become successful in this industry, you learn what things are really important. I don't think I ever would have just in my own head thought, okay, I need to be able to be so knowledgeable in the specific areas that I need to be able to drive around the city and tell people what the layouts are and what they sell for and what's coming up in that building. I never really thought of that until I watched him do it and thought, man, that is a ridiculous value add to people.
It helps when you're interested.
Totally.
If you're interested in the product, and I always have been, it sticks. I remember addresses better than names.
Yeah, me too.
But, when knowledge is power, I mean, absolutely. I think for myself, I remember in my early days going on a realtor tour, even showing properties, I would look at a wall and I'm like, I have no clue what's behind that wall. I'd see the outlets, come out of the wall, but I didn't really truly know the assembly of a house and all the systems and how it all worked. Mm. And that irritated me. But what I did from that is I just sat in inspection. Every time there was an inspection, I sat in that inspection. I'd listen to the inspector. Mm. And over time, that stuff that knowledge grows. And now it's why people contact me, and it's our team, our team, every member on our team gets more experience just because of the collective knowledge. But over time, it's nice to become an expert of something. And if you it's hard to be an expert of everything, but anyone that works with me understands that I have a passion of construction and not just real estate in terms of sales and dollar values, but just in terms of development potential, construction, and costs of, how to evaluate a property and what it's worth doing. And that's very helpful to clients. When you can help a client assess a property over a 5-minute phone call and they can bring clarity to their decision on that property, that is value. And that's the ultimate goal. And as a new realtor, don't expect to master everything, but start being a master of something. And I think my early days was Victoria Hill in New West. Mm-hmm. That was probably one of my prominent spots where I started gaining a lot of knowledge early. And then New Westminster and Burnaby, and it just kind of, the career kind of takes you from there. But you also touched on one good thing. I think whenever I'm chatting with a new agent, I always ask them in that conversation, where do you want to live in 5-10 years? When you see yourself, or just try to paint the picture, 10 years from now, you're successful in this business. Where do you live? And what are you selling? What do you want to be known for? And trying to put you might be right, you might be wrong, but actually thinking about that and catering your life to that and your marketing and your efforts to that is great. Doesn't mean, you might want to live in a nice home in Anmore or North Van and you want to sell luxury homes out there. It doesn't mean that you're going to go after that right out of the gates. But it might mean that if you want to be in Anmore, maybe you start with Port Moody condos and you work your way up. I think focusing on geographic areas and property types are two great ways to kind of carve out a name for yourself. Mm-hmm. You might focus on investor products. So you might be known as an investor realtor, or you might be known as a Port Moody realtor or a New Westminster realtor. You might be known as a luxury house realtor one day, but it may not happen right away. You might have to kind of work up to get there. You might have to start in condos in that city and work your way up. I always found it very helpful when you're young I think a real approach when you're young is just to focus on any product type in a city that you think you want to be an expert of. Mm-hmm. And then over time, as your career builds, you start getting higher up in price points and more higher dollar volume.
We want to bring this experience back to like tips and things that maybe helped us early in our career. One thing you mentioned, which is phenomenal, and I did every single time I had an inspection too, is just sit there, listen to the inspector and ask questions. Yep. If there was a term that he said or whoever said that I didn't understand, I would ask and say, well, what does that mean in terms of like future maintenance? And just like trying to hear their perspective on things. You learn a ton that way. So that's construction. We talked about contracts and understanding contracts. How do you learn them? For me, I would go to open houses that I knew were going to be slow, and I would just bring a copy of our contract purchase and sale, a copy of our listing contract, and just read through it. Because I don't know if it was insecurity early on, but I didn't want to ever be stuck. Like someone say, well, what does that term mean? And I have no clue.
It's not a good feeling.
No. So I remember sitting at an open house at 814 Royal.
I used to live there.
I know. In the lobby. I knew it was going to be slow. It was like the third or fourth week on market, I remember. And whatever. I was expecting 2 or 3 people to come through in a 2-hour window. So I was literally reading a listing contract. And if anyone has read through an entire listing contract, you'd be surprised how many realtors probably haven't, to be honest. But if you've read through an entire listing contract, it is dry. And there's terms in there that are borderline English. Like legal jargon doesn't make any sense.
What did I just read?
So literally I would just like circle parts of this contract and go home and Google what does this mean? And there was another realtor doing an open house, I remember. And she's like, are you reading a listing contract? I was like, yeah, I've been in this industry for like 6 months. I don't know what it means. I'm trying to understand what it means. She's like, man, I can honestly say I've never done that. Yeah. So like you mentioned time of day. There's times where you can be in front of clients. There's times where you can use your time a little wisely, and sitting in a slow open house, you can use that time to do other things.
I can remember doing the same. I can remember, I think a lot of people are attracted to real estate or real estate agent, that lifestyle, that job, career path by the money and the flexibility and the freedom. But contracts isn't usually the same strength. And I think it takes you can't be one-sided. You have to be well-rounded. And yes, successful real estate means being able to market yourself well and sell, but it doesn't, you have to, all it takes is one bad contract to really, stir up your reputation and impact someone's life negatively. And we're such a high stakes business. And there's so many ways. When we write a contract, it's less likely to have a detrimental error or less likely to have a seller or buyer move twice. It's more likely to the completion possession dates, just matching up a buy with a sell. I mean, as a new agent, you might not be thinking about that. As an experienced agent, you recognize how much more convenient it is for your clients if you can avoid them from getting bridge financing and moving twice. But if all you're focused on is the deal and you don't kind of account for their situation and have the best possible dates and know when you can get that extra gap between completion on possession on the sell, and tighten that gap on the buy and make it all work out so they have a seamless move, it's magic. It's great. That's the ultimate goal. I guess the unfortunate thing is when you do it, you don't necessarily get a trophy or recognized for it. It just, the clients don't experience this often, and they get to experience what you come up with. But boy, if you could really paint the picture of two side-by-side scenarios for them. Here, you're living in a hotel for a week and you're moving twice and you have bridge financing, versus here you move once and you don't. This is where experience comes in.
Totally.
And that's just one example on a contract side.
So I mentioned before, like being very impressed with your neighborhood knowledge and your knowledge of different stratas driving through New West. I can just remember a specific example in my head. I'll share a couple things that I did early on that I think helped me pick up, one, market values much quicker, but two, like neighborhood knowledge. And I want you to do the same if there's anything specific. But so in my first year, I did a lot of buyer tours. I remember you saying at one of the Realtor softball tournaments to another realtor, they're asking like how Denny's doing. I think I was maybe a year in. And they're like, or Jamie's response was, I'm pretty sure there isn't a realtor in Greater Vancouver that sees more properties a week than this guy.
I remember that. It's like, he probably sees the most properties I've had any realtor right now, because just you were loaded every day buyer tour, and those are tours.
Every day there would be 3.
Yeah. You'd be seeing in a given week easily 100 properties. Yeah. Well, no, sorry, not easily 100 properties, but it was common for you to see 100 properties in a week.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you ever knew this, but again, it's back to this, like sitting in the back of your car, listening to how impressive your knowledge of these neighborhoods was. And I thought, okay, well, I need to get there as quick as possible. So every night for probably my first year, I would have buyer tours for the next day. Let's say there's 12 properties I'm going to see, whatever it is. I would drive around to every single property, locate the front door, because I didn't want to look like an idiot, because I've never been to that strata before. If it was lockbox, I would find the lockbox with the camera or with the flashlight on my phone, because it's like 9 p.m. or whatever. And I would like walk around the building just to be able to understand where things were. If someone asked, oh, well, like what's on the other side of this? Like, are we back, like in the quay, you're backing onto the water, or wherever it is. That was really helpful for me. I never wanted to be in a position where I didn't have a good answer for a very simple question. Like where's the closest school? So I would drive around the city, go to every single building, find lockboxes, whatever, find the front door, find where you're supposed to park, not look like an idiot. Because often clients are in your car back in the day. And so if you're driving around and you have no idea where the building is, or you're looking at your phone being like, is this the right address? You look like an idiot. Or I thought I did anyway. And then go home, use like, there's probably better programs now, Carl, but like Walk Score, and just type in the address, find out where the like closest schools are, where is the closest park, look at it on your phone on Google Map, and just like, okay, the park is 3 blocks this way. The closest school is 6 blocks up there. There's a restaurant right, whatever it is. But just trying to have as much basic knowledge of a neighborhood and around that building as you could. And then the next step of it was market values. So if I'm seeing a building in New West, a 2-bedroom condo that's listed at $399 back in the day, these prices don't exist anymore. But clients would often ask, as you're walking out the door, what do you think the price is? Like, what, $399, is that a reasonable price for this? And if you say, I don't know, doesn't sound very good. Versus if you say, well, actually, unit 206, that's a pretty similar layout, sold 2 months ago for $365. And unit 401, top floor, had vaulted ceilings, whatever, sold $380. So $399 for this 3rd floor unit is probably pretty high. Instant credibility, right?
Yeah. if you're doing a buyer tour, and the buyer's interested in the property, I can sure as, odds are they're going to say, what do you think it's worth? And if you don't have a good answer for that, I mean, experience, when you have experience and you've been in the game for a long time, you can get away with, I don't know. I'll get back to you. You can get away with that. When you're brand new, I think it's more crucial than ever to use that spare time of being new to prep for your tours, prep for your showings. And if you're going to school catchments, that's above and beyond. But at the very least, I think, if you're a new client, new agent, know the sales. And if you're showing condos, know some of the recent sales in the building. It gives the client more confidence and peace of mind that they're working with the right person. And I think that's the value that new agents can do if they have the time, is every client is gold. Let's prove ourselves to that client. And don't think that client is one deal. That client could be a string of deals that grow throughout your career. I mean, I have one instance, my first year, when I was chasing for sale by owners and expiries, and I landed a FSBO listing and a FSBO for sale by owner. But I didn't sell it, but I got a listing in the complex from a neighbor because I worked the neighborhood. I dropped off flyers. I'm doing an open house. I hit it off with a neighbor, and I sold their place and helped them buy a house. And since 2008, 2009, when that happened, the string of effects of repeat business from them, referrals from them, the random business that happened from someone I met when I was selling their townhouse. It's over 20 deals now and hundreds of thousands in commission. And it all started from one interaction in an open house in a for sale by own listing. So I guess ultimately, if you're thinking of growing a business in this game, relationship management is key. Maintaining relationships is key. And that's where a lot of your business is going to come from, is the people that experience you and have a good experience.
It's such an important thing to focus on, and your action should reflect this. It's not a singular transaction. In our business, these relationships last 20, 30, 40, life often, right? Yeah. Like a lot of our past clients, we talk to a few times a year, and anytime they're meeting with their friends or their friends are looking to buy and sell real estate, they're using our names because of the relationships. Because in those transactions in the early days, go the extra mile, whatever it is, hiring a junk company to come pick up some stuff that was left in a house that a buyer didn't like when they walked in on possession day, or hiring a cleaner for $300 because the house wasn't clean enough and the buyer was a little bit upset. Like those little extras, yes, they're out of pocket expenses at the time, but they just go so far with the relationship. And that is what's so important in our business.
And check in after they move in.
Man, huge. It's huge. So it's huge. Knowing, like right now, I've got a couple of clients that are doing renos that have bought in the last 6 months, and they're currently going through renos. Like the little text once every couple of weeks, like, how's it going? How's the bathroom coming together? Did you pick a faucet yet? Those little, you're involved in their life. You are showing genuine interest, because I'm actually very interested in construction and renos, and I want to see the finishes that they're picking and like what Pinterest pictures they put together to build this thing in their life, right? But it goes a long way with the relationship. It's huge.
Yeah, even the traditional way when I first start out, that might be picking up a phone and calling someone, and I still do that. A little text is easy. Social media even as well. Follow your clients on Instagram during or after the transaction, and that's like the new age kind of keep in touch. Yeah. We have a lot of past clients that I'm friends with on Facebook and Instagram, and we don't have to phone each other. We all know what's going on in each other's lives. And that's become, the database, the people that know you is always going to be a growing part of your business if you're getting better and you're doing your job well. The big note here, we talked a lot about this, is learn the product and be, I think it's just there's a lot behind that. I guess the overarching thing is, when we have that question, where do you want to be 5-10 years out, to help you try to paint that picture? I think it's important to kind of niche yourself, especially when you're new. You can't learn everything at once. You can try, but I would take the approach of whether it's picking an area or picking a product type, whether it's investors or condos, or maybe you pick 2 areas. In my first career, when I first started, I grew up in Burnaby, And so all my life was in Burnaby. All the people I knew, well, a lot of the people I knew were in Burnaby. And I started my business I started a farming area, like flyer dropping a neighborhood, and then call it 3,000 homes. I started in Burnaby. But I did it around where I grew up, and it was, higher end properties. So I think what I was doing is I was flyering like Deer Lake area where I grew up, and I flyered, some condos around Brentwood where I lived at the time. And I wasn't getting much of a return on it. But I knew Burnaby very well, and all it takes is, I just wanted a sign out front, and sometimes I would get a call, and I did sell some homes from those flyers. But I noticed that just, it was a lot of money going out and not a lot coming back. And then so what I did is, I was like a 3,000 unit called Burnaby farming area. And then what I did is I started in New West as well, just because I thought, you know what, New West has a lot of condos. I'm a younger person. The price points are affordable. Let's see where it goes. And I started farming Victoria Hill. And I noticed when I looked at the results in Burnaby versus New West, I was getting a much higher return in New Westminster. And it was really true, like I was indifferent. If Burnaby gave me the return on the flyers and marketing, I would have just grown that Burnaby flyer drop. But New West outperformed Burnaby. And after a year of it, I dropped Burnaby and grew New West. And not that I like farming or sending out flyers. I think it's a very costly way to market yourself. But as long as my competitors are doing it, and as long as I feel that it'll get me a listing that I wouldn't have received if I didn't farm, and if I feel that person's going to have a great experience and I could have multiple future referrals and deals from them, that justified farming for me. That justified spending $3,000 to get two phone calls, one new listing, or one new client, and maybe a 2-to-1 return on that $3,000 or $4,000 of marketing. If I was just doing it for that one deal, it wouldn't make sense. But if you feel that you're going to get more out of it, then it absolutely does. Because I did find that that expensive marketing to get those expensive listings, I did find that it did fill the gaps on where I may have had nothing to sell or no product on the shelves. And it's always nice to have a conversation about what you're selling. Mm-hmm. I think when I look back at my career, I'm pretty confident maybe it was year one, or I think 2009, since 2009, other than intentional moments like, between Christmas and New Year's, or maybe sometimes July 31st, I've always had a listing. So there's always been a listing for 12 years. It's hard, so, and that was intentional. Like that was intentional because it meant so much to me early on to get those listings, to get those phone calls. Because if you don't have listings, you're not getting those phone calls, and you're working maybe at social media, your database, but it's nice to get those phone calls. And so, New West had a better return on the marketing. I grew the farming in Victoria Hill. It expanded to the Quay, downtown New Westminster, then to houses. And this is by no means the most effective way of marketing, but I was open-minded to anything. New West had the better return. That's where the business grew. And that's where the focus became because of that return.
When you're in your first and second year, early in your career, your asset is time, right? So yes, Jamie is talking about flyer drops, and those are expensive. What do we spend a month on flyers right now?
Oh, geez.
$7,000 to $10,000?
Yeah, maybe.
Early in the year. It's not a monthly thing for us every year, but early in the year.
40 to 40,000 a year, maybe 50,000 a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that. There are other ways, because you have more time early in your career. You can print letters. What does a sheet of paper cost? 7 cents.
Yeah.
So print 100 letters. What's the math on that? $7.
Oh, even if it's $70, Denny, it's
whatever it is. So print 1,000 letters, and you pay under $100 for letters. Walking around a neighborhood, discussing a recent sale, dropping off letters, showing that you're educated in the neighborhood and you know what's going on. Some stats about the neighborhood, maybe, the last 30 days of sales versus last year and how prices have gone up 5%, whatever it is. There's a lot of ways you can do it on foot that take time, but you don't need to spend a lot of money to get in front of people. And that's what I did a lot early. And I found a lot more success than just, I did all the traditional prospecting stuff. The cold calling stuff was definitely not my favorite. But I found a lot more success in building off the momentum of sales that were happening through our team. Early on, it was Jamie's sales, and I would just walk around neighborhoods after every sale and drop off 200 letters and say, hey, it was lucky for me at that point that I could say our team just sold your neighbor's property versus, if you're new and you're just kind of piggybacking off of other realtors' sales in neighborhoods and just sharing information, basically. You're saying, hey, did you know your neighbor just sold? If you're thinking about selling, I'd love to share some more information with you about your neighborhood or whatever it is. But there's no secret sauce. It's just get in front of people.
Working a listing or working an opportunity, though, is very easy and very effective.
Yeah.
And you instantly have credibility because you're doing something in the neighborhood or the area. When I look back at my year one, I kind of remember a little bit of rhythm to my day. And early morning might be emails or time to learn, whatever it is. You're doing a market evaluation, you're setting up a tour, you're doing stuff that doesn't involve talking to potential clients. Mm-hmm. But once 9 o'clock hit, I think I would call expiries and for sale by owners. That was part of my tactic of trying to get listings early on. And I didn't you come into this business, you get a listing opportunity, you get an opportunity to get a listing, like a listing presentation with a seller. You being in that room is gold. And if you're new, you're less likely to get it, unless you work at it. So what I found is I valued experience. I wanted to learn. I wanted to figure out how to approach these listing presentations. So what I would do is I'd try to set up an appointment with an expired listing or for sale by owner. And once that appointment was set, I would reach out to a couple experienced agents in my office, and I would bring them in that were also agents that would do a lot of business or also very familiar with that expiry for sale by owner game. And I would team up with them, co-list the listing with them and go in with them on the presentation. What I found from that is there's 3 agents that I kind of brought in that were veterans in my company that I would team up with. And I found very quickly that 2 of them didn't have the style that I liked. It didn't feel right. And when you're a new agent and you have, I'm sure it's still today, but definitely back in the day, you get this traditional training in real estate where it's like, here's how your listing presentation should be. Yeah. And, it could be as ridiculous of like a 100-page thick binder and you're trying to close them on page 1, 5, 10, 20. And it's like an aggressive approach. You just keep showing them stuff until you close the listing. I saw that approach. I saw the no listing presentation, all sales, charisma, sign on the spot. No, I'm not going to take no for an answer approach. And then, a realtor named Jeff Jarman, who's still in the business, he was an early mentor of mine. I liked his approach the best. And I brought him on a few listing appointments. And he had, call it a dozen sheets of a presentation. It wasn't overwhelming. He was more engaging with the client and asking the right questions. He was being himself. And I thought, that seems more right to me. I could be myself. I don't have to do this these traditional or these certain sales tactics that you get pumped, and just having the relief of being yourself and then getting some little tips on the right questions to ask or the certain more impactful slides or parts of your presentation, where to focus, how to adapt to different concerns from different people. Some people might be really concerned about marketing. Some people might be really concerned about experience. Some people just want to have someone they can trust. Everyone has a different concern, but it took me going into these appointments a dozen times with 3 different veteran realtors to find one realtor that I could connect with and one style that I could connect with. And then after those appointments, I was like a butterfly and went off on my own. But early days, you're still heavily in the buyers and light on the listings. And I appreciate all the good and bad experiences I had chasing those for sale by owners and expiries. That was not fun. It was difficult. And I guess I started talking about the rhythm of my day and I got distracted by it. But I would call those for sale by owners in the morning. And then during the midday, who knows, whatever you had to do that day, you would do. And I would always try to carve out some time in the late afternoon for just straight up cold calling. When I was at the peak of it, it would be maybe an hour of for sale by owners and FSBOs in the morning, and then 200 phone calls that I would pull off a list in the afternoon. And out of those 200 phone calls, I might get 40 of them on the phone and I might get 2 leads. But it was 200 calls no matter what. And I could probably hammer through it in under an hour. And it would be the list of people I'm calling and then a list of sales in their building. And, I'd look for, hey, at that time I was with Sutton Group West Coast. Did Sutton Group West Coast sell into this building? I'm like, our company had a sale in your building. Just curious to know if you would thinking of selling in the near future. And yeah, whatever your script is, you find your comfortable language, you find how you're comfortable approaching it. And what that worked for me. And I think I did it pretty solid for about a year. And what I found was after a year, I got busy. And then but I still had this long list of leads that I developed from all those calls. And then 6 months later, I got busy and I ignored that list. And 6 months later, I revisited that list. And I saw that half of them, like 40% of them had listed or sold and transacted over that period of time of 6 to 12 months when I didn't contact them. And that frustrated me. So what I learned is cold calling works. Building those leads work. It's not fun. It's nice having a fixed end date. Of mine was 200 calls. It was 4 days a week at one point, and then it got dialed back to 1 day a week, and then it just stopped happening. But having a system and a rhythm and a reward when you get through it, like I'm only doing 200 calls, and no matter whether I get a lead or not, that's it. It was nice to have that kind of structure, and I even look back and I think that I did a poor job of maintaining those opportunities and leads that I could have done because I lost a lot of opportunities. But I was still, ahead of the rest. I still, in 2009, I did over 50 deals. And that was my first full calendar year in the business. And I had some advantages. And by advantages, I mean, that was in the realm of early Facebook days where if you messaged someone on Facebook, they looked at it. So I would put deals out to people on Facebook, and it was like getting a text message, the return was so high. And I worked Facebook in the early days when it was effective. I worked video in the early days when people, you could have terrible video and people just love that you're in front of a camera. Everything was just so mind blown new that it wasn't as hard to stand out by doing a couple things that others weren't doing. Anyway, where am I going with that, Denny?
No, I like it. Anything else really helpful we can share for first years?
So I said, find your niche, become an expert of something, not everything, so that you're known for something. A little thing that I've done, still do. When you're driving around town, take a different street every time you go somewhere. Don't take the same street everywhere. And yes, if you go down Low Heat Highway and this is the route you go, great, but you're not going to learn neighborhoods if you take the same streets everywhere. Be a cab driver, take the side streets, take different routes everywhere you go. I think learning the city, learning the communities, there's layers to knowledge. At the start, you need to know the basics, but if you want to get into houses and you want to become a true expert at something, you got to start learning about zoning and construction costs and what all it takes. I mean, I've built a few homes, but I general contracted a house from start to finish just to learn everything about it. Learn every inspection. I made a ton of mistakes. There's 20 video blogs on it. You can see it on YouTube. But overall, I think as a whole thing, knowledge is power, and finding your niche is important, and also finding your audience is important. And you could have more than one audience. You could be and what I mean by that is you could be an expert of Port Moody or an expert of North Vancouver, an expert of Walnut Grove, but also be an expert of Instagram and that what you share on Instagram and your Instagram audience, recognize that is not a geographically limited audience. That is a more broad audience. So when you're talking on Instagram, you might want to speak a little bit more broad. But that doesn't mean that on Instagram, when you're sending a flyer out to Walnut Grove, you want that Walnut Grove community to think that you're a Walnut Grove expert. So if you're doing traditional marketing in a geographic area, you want to scream, I am Walnut Grove, Walnut Grove, Walnut Grove. But on Instagram, if you just scream Walnut Grove, Walnut Grove, Walnut Grove, you're going to be 90% of your audience might be ignoring your message. So it's recognizing the audience and the medium. I think that's important as well.
It's the same with, it's a really good point, actually. It's the same with if you're starting out, you're thinking about building a website for yourself and your business. Yeah. And calling your website, like, I remember you said early in my career, calling your website like Newest Guys, or like newestrealestate.com or, whatever. It's just limiting your exposure online versus your name is going to go everywhere. Same, like exactly the point that you just made about Instagram. It's not geographic. You may have friends in North Van and people that follow you in Langley and Abbotsford and, wherever. But if they are following you on your Instagram and they like what you're talking about and they like your personality and they want to work with you in a year from now, they're going to look at your website. And if your website says New West Real Estate and they're looking to buy a condo in Langley, they're probably skipping you.
Yeah. So it's why we've always gone with names in our branding as opposed to area.
Yeah.
I know we've had conversations about this because the lure of Instagram is you can build an audience for free, really, and that audience stays with you. And you've always preferred that over anything. Is you're always like, let's just spend more time on Instagram and we'll get better return. But I remember having this conversation with you in Victoria Hill, and I think I pointed at a building. I'm like, if we want a listing in that building and we scream Victoria Hill and Instagram, those sellers aren't going to see us. Mm-hmm. So if we want a listing in that building, we need to communicate with that building. And that's where a letter comes into play. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't mean that one's better than the other. It means do both. If you want to be an expert of something, they might not know about you if your comfortable medium is Instagram. Doesn't mean don't do Instagram. If that's your medium, you feel comfortable on it. And I mean, we're in real estate, it's visual. It makes sense. Get comfortable with it. But also, do something different to target directly where the people that own the properties that you want to sell, where they're seeing it. And I can't think of a better way than a letter or just physically talking to them. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's end with a story.
Which story? Okay.
Well,
Ooh.
I think it comes back to probably the most important thing about your first year is driving a nice car. And
yeah,
in my first year, I had a 2-door 2006 maybe Chevrolet Cobalt. Not ideal for getting buyers into your back seat because you got to fold the front seat forward to get people back there. So again, maybe it was self-conscious. I don't know. Insecurities for me, but I hated it. It was always uncomfortable. I was embarrassed. I would start sweating when I had to fold the seat forward for people to get back in the back of the car. So what I would do is borrow Jamie's car for buyer tours, which turned out to be like a few days a week usually.
Oh yeah.
Hey, what are you doing
car
tomorrow?
swap.
Yeah. And man, it is.
You should let them know. I had a luxury Toyota Camry hybrid, white, and I think at the time when you bought it, did I have the James Garbutt decal on the back window?
No, but when I bought my condo from you, you did. My first condo, I remember. I was like, "Ooh, slick! You got decals." But yeah, go ahead.
No. But the funny thing is the car. Yeah. When I did the same thing with my parents' car a few times when I first started out. But I do have a distinct memory because I had a silver Honda Accord with a smashed up front bumper. So I had a cracked front bumper I got the crack fixed, but the bumper was still crooked after. And I had one client mention, I like that you had a crappy car because it made me feel more comfortable. If he was a young guy, and it's by no means am I going to get the big dollar listings driving around in that car. There are exceptions. And I think there are a lot of people that can appreciate someone new and someone trying to work their way up with a car that's not nice. But a lot of the times when you're on the sell side and you're trying to get confidence of someone, they want to know that you're successful. And if you pull up in a rugged looking car, if you're unexperienced, if you're very experienced and know your stuff, you could get away with any car. But if you don't, yeah, it's nice to have something somewhat presentable.
When we would go to listing appointments in that first year when I had that Chevy, a 2-door Chevy, I would park a block or two away and just walk over because I didn't want the seller. If we're going to, like in those days, that was 2014. So let's say we're going to like $1 million listing in New West, and that's like a higher end property. What was entry level price point then? $700K, $750 maybe. So if we're going to like $1 million listing, I did not want the seller to see that I was driving like a little, and not that it's a shitty car, and I wasn't that old at the time, but I wasn't driving a Beamer. I wasn't even driving a Camry. I just didn't want them to see. So I wanted them to like value us for knowledge and how we market versus the car that I showed up in.
Yeah. I mean, it's 13 years ago for me, the first year, a lot of it is a blur. Yeah. I do remember working every day, and I remember working from morning to night often. I do remember, and a lot of it was just because of the inefficient technology of the time. Today we have DocuSign, and when I first started, we were still faxing, and I would run around town in the evening time to get initials for all the changes on contracts. So I would, you get in negotiation, I'd have to drive for 30 minutes to get a set of initials from a seller, then drive back and then fax it off to someone, and then you do a couple of those back and forth in a negotiation, you end up with a legible initial version of the contract, a halfway through version of the contract, so they can see that over the scanning and faxing, the quality went down, but it's still the original one because the firm and binding final contract is not even legible because it's just been faxed so many times that you just can't even read it. So I submitted a few deals where I'd send multiple versions of the contract so they could see the evolution of how the quality went down so that they could read what it originally said. Yeah. But in today's world, we are so efficient at getting signatures and getting doing an actual deal comparatively to how long it took before. I think the big challenge is everything's getting easier. So what do you spend your time on when you don't have to spend your time running around getting initials? Well, there's a lot of people on social media. I think social media is great. I don't think you have to do everything. I think Instagram is important for our industry right now, but that doesn't mean that something else will come and take it away. We're Instagram and Facebook primarily. We dropped Twitter. But you don't have to be socially, a social media wizard. If you're catering towards investors or just in general, if you just have good systems of keeping in touch with your database, whether that's email campaigns and occasional cards, you can be just as effective that way. Mm-hmm. Social media is just a helpful tool if you're willing to put some energy into it. And it's basically an online resume because if you want to get a listing, a lot of people will look you up. And we do get a lot of business because of our social handles. Totally. So in short, focus your energy but don't feel that it's a must. You can be there's a ton of commercial brokers out there that sell huge dollar value properties and they do nothing on social media.
Nothing.
Yeah.
I like it. That was fun.